This was HMS Wellington's world, the task for which she was made, to police the British Empire's Pacific dominions. A far cry from the vast grey waters that were to be the setting for her role in the greatest and longest struggle of the Second World War, the Battle of the Atlantic. A battle Britain dare not lose. But the sea she was born to sail was vast enough. Wellington was built as an Imperial patrol sloop, a living embodiment of the famous command, send a gunboat. 8 of her class were launched in the 1930s at naval dockyards all around Great Britain, all named after seaports. They were designed to protect Britain's colonies, however far-flung they were, and they were far-flung indeed. Vast too. HMS Wellington had to cover more than 8 million square miles of the Western Pacific, bringing the prestige of the Union flag to islands like the Solomons, the Gilbert and Ellice Islands, and Samoa. But Wellington was meant to be more than that. Alone of her class, she was to be the nucleus of a New Zealand navy, hence her name, in honour of the country's capital, hence her roving brief across the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
Well, in these far-flung reaches, the only way you could get around really was by sea. And to maintain any kind of imperial presence, you needed a ship looking very smart, white hull, yellow funnel, that could come along with a very smart crew, perhaps with some dignitary or other, to make the point that these islands were part of this great global British Empire. Without ships like this maintaining presence, it would have been much more difficult for these islands to have been maintained, and somebody else might have thought, well, perhaps we can maintain order better.
But Wellington, seen here as she is today in Pacific-style livery, was soon to be detached for sterner duties and stormier waters. In 1939, as the Nazi menace darkened over Britain, she was recalled to home waters. She soon found herself in the thick of the action, with a dramatic dash to the French port of Saint-Valery to rescue the 51st Highland Division, fighting a desperate rearguard as the drama of Dunkirk unfolded. Wellington's crew brought off as many soldiers as they could in the ship's boats. A good shepherd indeed. But her wartime flock was to be found in deeper waters, as she took up her task of protecting the Atlantic convoys carrying vital supplies to Britain, no matter what the weather.
Occasionally, we'd feel the deck pressing under our feet as she lifted over a bigger than usual swell. Then it would fall away from under us as she went down the other side. If she was being pushed forward fast enough in bad weather, she could drop over a big wave fast enough to leave her propellers out of the water, and the whine of the turbines would rise to a scream as her screws freewheeled. Then she'd shudder as if she was laughing as they bit into the sea again.
Merchant ships, what they must have gone through is unbelievable. To look through binoculars, looking at them, but just carrying on as they normally do. And the next minute you hear a bang, and that was it. You see a load of smoke going up where one's oil tanker's going up or something like that. A little bit of a sickening feeling, you get, But you got so used to it then, you see.
Wellington was typical of the unspectacular way in which the escort forces of the Royal Navy carried out their function. And their primary function was the safe and timely arrival of the convoy. If you could sink U-boats, well and good, fine. But the main task was to get the ships through. What we tend to forget is that most convoys in the Second World War were not attacked. They were routed round known threats. The numbers of ships lost by convoys escorted by Wellington was very, very small. And that was a great success, but a success that tends to be unsung because it's not spectacular.
From the very beginning of the war, Wellington was a ship in flux, speedily adapted to her anti-submarine role and swiftly equipped and re-equipped with the means to deal with the U-boats hunting the Allied convoys.
She was first fitted with radar, then she was fitted with better radar, the so-called centimetric radar, that can actually see something like a U-boat's conning tower on the surface at night. She lost her rather old-fashioned anti-aircraft gun and got a weapon called Hedgehog, which was a kind of mortar, a spigot mortar, which fired bombs ahead of the ship. And then, of course, the number of her depth charges was greatly increased. She was designed originally for 40 depth charges, and that was a lot by the standards of the 1930s. By 1943, depth charges were being fired in tens, and so her depth charge capacity had to be very significantly enhanced as well. By 1943-44, Wellington was transformed into a first-class anti-submarine asset.
It was in that convoy duty that Wellington excelled. In 6 years of war, she steamed 250,000 miles, escorting over 100 convoys in the western approaches of the Atlantic and further east on the coast of Africa, as well as in the Mediterranean. Steaming for hour after hour through seas foul and fair, she and her sisters set to in the face of the U-boat threat and knew what to do when it came to an attack, as Wellington veteran Griff Williams remembers.
On the Wellington, it was full ahead, both engines. She'd be at action stations now and battened down. The first depth charge from the rails would roll over the stern, released by the levers up on the bridge. The next one would roll off a few seconds later. Before the final charge was dropped, the first one would be exploding. The ship would jump like she'd been kicked up the backside. To those sealed below deck, each explosion sounded like a mass of sledgehammers pounding on the ship's side.
Hedgehog, even more lethal to U-boats, hurled circles of mortar bombs into the sea ahead of the ship. That was a task for Peter Gibbs, then a 20-year-old able seaman.
One of my main jobs was the Hedgehog, right on the front of there, right where the 3-inch gun used to be. They'd done away with the 3-inch and you fired them straight off.
With good effect, too. Here, Wellington can be seen in the distance after her Hedgehog attack forced a German U-boat to the surface. Wellington's work as Good Shepherd wasn't just about defeating attackers. She also rescued survivors, 450 in all. Among them, those saved from the passenger ship Highland Patriot. 3 of the Patriot's crew were lost in the attack, but Wellington saved the rest. The sloop became a family ship, with scores of men, women and children all squeezed on board to be taken to safety.
The 14,000-ton liner Highland Patriot was torpedoed by a U-boat in the Atlantic without warning. A British warship raced to the scene and picked up over 300 survivors, landing them safely at a British port. This was another example of the watch kept by the Navy over the seas, and of the inhuman methods of German submarines, which have always disregarded all principles of humanity. It makes us all the more determined to crush the monster that holds life so cheap.
It's a very different scene below decks today. But then the mess decks were given over to the survivors, who returned the kindness by preparing meals for the crew and doing the washing up. For the youngsters, it was one big adventure, dressing in sailors' uniforms, steering the ship, even startling lookouts by suddenly appearing in the crow's nest.
I think your seaman's mess deck was,
That's right, yes.
which would have been up here.
That's it.
But these were not the only survivors rescued, as Griff Williams recalls.
No survivors ever died because HMS Wellington was too afraid to pick them up.
Ships like Wellington were the best escorts in many ways that the Royal Navy had, and they were crucial to winning the Battle of the Atlantic. There were many merchant ships, I think, that survived World War II because of the escort of this sloop.
Wellington is still on active service. The ship herself is under the ownership of the Wellington Trust. They preserve and maintain her as a heritage ship to educate the nation about the history of the British Merchant Navy and the importance today of the ships and people who cross the ocean to bring us all we need. And for those who served in her during the perilous years, she has left one more lasting legacy.
HMS Wellington. She had taken us as boys and made us into men.
The second it hit, you knew what it was. There were no mistaking it. And then all this water came cascading down on. My first thoughts was, I haven't got a life jacket. By that time, the ship was over at about 30 degrees.
The whole thing went right over and tipped over on its keel.
Yeah, there's a limit to what you can stand under those conditions.
One of the most memorable phrases of the Second World War was the defiant "Britain can take it," coined for this city, London, and its blitz spirit by an American newsreel reporter. It quickly became a motto of national defiance. But perhaps among Britain's people, none had to stand and take it more than those remembered here at the Merchant Navy Memorial. These men sailed in ships that were the lifeline of the nation, without which the war would certainly have been lost. And sailors of the Merchant Navy lived on their nerves in both world wars, unable to fight back, sitting targets as they crossed the oceans in convoy. They never knew when, in their laconic phrase, their number was up. And when it was, their ordeal might only just be beginning, as the order came, abandon ship.
Abandon ship!
Your victory. Victory of the cause of freedom is every day. In all our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this.
There were thousands of people there, and I was one of them. And it was an exciting moment of my life. People were waving and shouting, you know, with joy and things of that nature, and it was quite a wonderful experience.
HMS Wellington laying off the Victoria Embankment in London, prepared to receive a very special visitor. Boys and girls from London schools were to act as a guard of honour for Admiral of the Fleet, Earl Mountbatten. Purpose of his visit was as guest of honour of the British Ship Adoption Society, whose chairman, Mr. John McConaughey, has found the solution to the problem of the scarcity of adoptable ships. The Royal Navy came to his aid. Until this year, the Society was restricted to allowing schools throughout the nation to adopt only merchant vessels. Now, 29 ships of the RM have close ties with schools following a go-ahead from the Navy Department. The reaction from both youngsters and the ships has been very enthusiastic.
a very special privilege and honour to welcome Your Royal Highness, sir, who is also this country's Lord High Admiral, and we have been granted the privilege today to fly the Lord High Admiral's flag, which we think is the first time this has been flown here in London. It was meant to be at the truck of the foremast, but unfortunately some seagull scarers, little spikes, were put on the top of the mast, and we had this great fear that the Lord High Admiral's flag would become impaled on these seagull scarers, which wouldn't have endeared us to the palace forever. Our exhibition is about the Battle of the Atlantic and the heroic part played by the Merchant Navy and the Royal Navy and other navies protecting and sailing in our convoys. For these reasons, it is also a pleasure to have with us the representatives of the High Commission from Australia, Canada and New Zealand, and the Naval Attaché from the United States of America, who as allies at sea helped win the Battle of the Atlantic. Why the old HMS Wellington? She's the only floating naval vessel which saw active service and support of convoys all the way through the Second World War, supporting some 76 convoys in the Atlantic. In February this year, the Prime Minister finally agreed presentation of the Arctic Star to those veterans of the Royal and Merchant Navies still able to wear them. I know they do this with enormous pride for a job well done. We have 2 Arctic Stars here, and I will ask His Royal Highness if he can present the first one to Commander James Wyatt. Mr. Donald Harris.